To my second episode of My Mind to Your Mind. I am your host, Dragonborn of Schrodinger's Clubhouse, and I'll be going into the and I'll be expanding more on what I said in the sound, what it is, and how it behaves episode, or episode 5 of Schrodinger's Clubhouse that I did recently. Now, one thing that I didn't get into was, as I mentioned, there was the atomic vibrations. Well, there's certain frequencies in which it vibrates. So if you imagine something like normally what you think of a wave, where you think of a peak and a trough, and it goes up and down like an ocean wave. The frequency would the amplitude and the frequency there's different amplitudes and frequencies of these sound waves. From 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz is the range of hearing that we have. Anything below that or above that it's called ultrasound. Below that it's called infrasound. So there's various different frequencies, and the different frequencies would actually be like the peaks and troughs. It isn't actually the atom moving up and down forward, it's just the atom moving up. That's how much the atom is moving up and down on its own. Now, that's just in 2 dimensions. In 3 dimensions, that kind of works that way, but it doesn't just move up and down. It could also move sideways, diagonally. You get the idea. Now, some of the potential applications of sound that we have found, including would be one of which is echolocation, or as we call it, sonar, at least for our systems. So echolocation is basically the idea of sending a sound wave out, and then getting it a bounce. Then if there's something there, what you emitted, part of it will come back, and from that you can actually determine how big the object is, potentially what its properties are, how fast it's moving, and whether it's moving towards you, away from you, or like perpendicular, or if it's moving left or right or any other directions. Echolocation and sonar are both the same thing. We use sonar, but echolocation is the term we use when we're talking about animals in nature that use it. To be specific, there's two main ones that most people know about: dolphins and bats, who can use this as kind of an extrasensory perception, sort of. I say sort of because it's not anything extrasensory. Now, going into a cooler aspect of it, because one of the things that sound produces is a pressure wave. It's a byproduct of the mechanical energy. And one thing interesting you can do is you can push things or you can pull things using it. So, or you can actually levitate things with it. So, for instance, in 2006, a team of researchers actually made a setup. It basically had a speaker on the bottom and a speaker on the top, and then they put little balls into in between, and the balls actually floated in midair because the pressure waves from the sound waves were holding it up in the air against gravity. But more impressive, and more recently, and arguably more impressive, we actually created the first real-life sonic tractor. It's more like a tractor beam, although it's actually a sonic tractor beam, which is still awesome. The way it works is it has 64 little mini speakers that are laid out flat, and those little mini speakers produce different frequencies and amplitudes of sound. Amplitude is how exaggerated the wave is. So, for instance, low amplitude would be something like this, while high amplitude would be something like this, like a highly energetic wave, and a causation / correlation is the higher the amplitude, the higher the frequency. The frequency would be like, okay, if you imagine ocean waves, like you might if using ocean waves, if there's a flat, like say this is flat ocean, and if you have a low energy wave, there won't, the frequency will be how many times you see that peak come up and how many times that trough, you'll see that trough, how many, it's the wavelength, the frequency would be the amount the time between peaks. So, for instance, for something like infrasound, the peak might be over here, while the next peak might be over here, and the main trough might be here, but it's still very spread out. While something like ultrasound, the peaks would be here, the trough would be like here. So, knowing that, they can produce different. Knowing that, you could it produces different pressure. You can use sound to make areas of high. Yes, Stash? Stash, get down. You could use different frequencies of sound to make areas of high pressure and low pressure. And that's how they control. They're still controlling little balls with it. These balls are only like this big. They're like little ping pong balls, but it's still pretty cool because when you put it on, it's about the setup itself is about this big, and you usually hold it with two hands. So you might be holding it here. The speakers would be here. Then you put the ball about here, and the way it works is it produces different shapes of high and low pressure using different frequencies of sound waves. So, for instance, there might be two areas of high pressure here, or completely around on the bottom, and then an area of low pressure in the middle, followed by normal pressure above. So when you drop that ball in, it will want to stay in the area of low pressure, about the middle of low pressure, but the area of low pressure, while avoiding the area to high and normal air pressure. That's how it works. So other than that, there's two things. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the relation between speakers and bombs. Sorry, my cat is causing mayhem. So, normally we think of sound bombs and speakers as two completely different things, working completely differently. The bomb produces a shock wave, while the speaker produces a sound wave. But they're actually more really, Stash. They're actually more related. The shock wave and the sound waves are basically the same thing, with one major difference. So there's something called decibels, which is basically how energetic, how energetic a sound wave is. So, for instance, the way I'm talking now is about 165 decibels. About 65 decibels, which is about the normal decibel count for a normal conversation. But when it comes to bombs, they produce decibel levels, or basically acoustic energy levels, so high that the vibrational energy of the atoms around it is so high that they actually go literally supersonic. and that's what a shockwave is. So I hope you enjoyed this, along with the inclusion of my cat stash. So if you like this kind of content, like and subscribe. This is episode 2 of My Mind to Your Mind. If you prefer me talking about other things, or you want to see my first episode, if you want to see my main video series, Soninger's Clubhouse, check those out. Have a good night, and good day, and let the science be with you.